Mr. President, dear delegates, first of all, I would like to say that it's really an honor to be back here and to meet with you. This time in this beautiful city of Istanbul. Last time I think we met in Norway, in Stavanger. And I will speak to you about the challenges and the tasks that NATO is facing and how NATO is responding. But before I do that, I would like to thank the Turkish Parliament for hosting us. And I would also like to thank the President, Mike Turner, for the excellent way he has chaired this assembly and the cooperation I have had with him. We have met many different times in many different occasions, but I remember very well when Mike attended the NATO summit in Warsaw. He spoke to the leaders, and when you did that, I actually thought about the importance of having you representing the parliaments around the table with the heads of state and government in Warsaw. And I look forward to work with the new president, and I promise that I will continue to be in close contact with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for many reasons, but not least because this assembly is a very important political body. Because the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is truly a transatlantic institution, binding NATO together across the Atlantic with representatives from the European NATO allies, from Canada and the United States, and partner nations. And the bonds, the partnership, the friendship you create in this assembly is important for the whole alliance because it strengthens the transatlantic bond. Second, this assembly is important because you are representing the national parliaments. And I believe I've said this before, but I will repeat it because it is so important. I have been a parliamentarian myself, and I know the importance of parliaments in decision-making in the different NATO allied countries. Because parliaments decide on the guidelines, the framework for defense and security policies. No government can conduct in the long term a policy which is against the will of the parliaments. So therefore what you decide, what you agree, is of great importance for what NATO can do and what NATO allies are able to agree on. You are key for key decisions for NATO, like for instance defense spending. And that has been my main focus since I became Secretary General in 2014, is how can we increase defense spending among those NATO allies which are spending less than 2%. And that is actually your main responsibility, is to decide budgets. And therefore I know that to speak to you is of great importance for me because you are the representatives representing those parliaments which are at the end deciding defense spending in the different NATO allied countries. You are also key for another reason, and that is because parliaments actually decide who is going to be member of NATO. And you know that we are now in the process of inviting the process of enlarging NATO with a new member, Montenegro. The accession treaty is signed. What remains to be done is the ratification. And many nations have already ratified the accession agreement for Montenegro. It has to be done in all 28 parliaments. So I urge those parliaments, I urge those countries that have not yet ratified the accession agreement for Montenegro to do so. This is a responsibility for you, for the parliaments, and I speak directly to you. Go back to your parliaments, make sure that you ratify that accession agreement as soon as possible. We will have a summit in NATO next year, and it is really something I think we should be able to deliver by the summit next year, that we have the accession agreement ratified by all parliaments, so we can welcome Montenegro as a full member by the summit in 2017, and that may happen early 17, so you have to hurry up and to ratify the accession agreement. So as you understand, I attach great importance to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly because you represent parliaments which are so important for our alliance. There is yet another reason why I believe that this assembly is of great importance, and that is just the plain fact that you represent different parties, different nations, different political opinions. So the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is a platform for political discussion, for political exchange between different people, different opinions. And I think this magnitude, this variety of opinions are of great importance in itself, because it reflects that NATO is an alliance of 28 democracies. There are disagreements, there are different views, there are different positions on many issues. But the strength of NATO is that we have always been able to agree on the core task, on our core responsibility, and to stand together on the message that we are here to protect each other, to defend each other, and to stand together in the strongest alliance of the world. And that was actually also what we managed to do at Warsaw. At the summit, we made important decisions on collective defense, on projecting stability, and on working together with the European Union to strengthen our cooperation with the European Union. And I will address briefly these issues, and then I'm more than happy to answer questions on all the other issues, and also elaborate a bit more on collective defense, projected stability later on during the Q&A session. But before I do that, I will just also remind us all of the fact that we are meeting here in Turkey 4 short months after the failed coup attempt. This should be a sober reminder to us all, a reminder that democracy and freedom cannot be taken for granted. They must be vigorously defended. In September, I visited the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, which had been shelled by tanks and F-16s, bombed by F-16s. I saw the damage that was done, and I met members of the parliament from all major political parties. They rushed to the parliament on the night of the coup attempt and stood together in defense of their democratic institutions. It made a lasting impression on me, and I want to salute them today for their courage and dedication to democracy. Democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law are NATO's core values, and I personally attach great importance to them, as you do, members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And the NATO Parliamentary Assembly is a platform for democratic debate and open exchange of different views among parliamentarians from all our member states and partner countries. And the important thing is that, given that we all represent different nations and we represent different political parties, we again and again have proven that we are able to stand together in the alliance on the main message of collective defense and the will to defend each other. And that was exactly what we did in Warsaw. And we decided to strengthen our collective defense in response to Russia's aggressive actions in Ukraine and ongoing military buildup of Russia. NATO has taken prudent and necessary steps. We are increasing our defensive presence in the eastern part of the alliance, including the deployment of 4 multinational battalions to the Baltic states and Poland. Earlier this year, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States each committed to lead one of those battalions. and I want to thank those nations for their leadership. I also want to express my appreciation to the 13 other allies that have pledged to join these forces. Our preparations for the 4 battalions are on track. We expect to deploy all 4 battalions in early 2017. This sends a clear message. NATO is united. We stand together as one. And an attack on one ally will be considered an attack against us all. NATO is also taking steps to strengthen our presence in the Black Sea region. There will be a Romanian-led multinational brigade, and we are working on additional defensive measures in the air and at sea as well. Everything NATO does is defensive, proportionate, and fully in line with our international commitments. Before Russia's aggressive actions in Ukraine, NATO had no plans to send troops to the eastern part of our alliance. NATO's aim is to prevent a conflict, not to provoke a conflict. Moreover, we firmly believe and we are firmly committed to a 2-track approach to Russia. Strong defense coupled with meaningful dialogue. When tensions run high, it is even more important to keep channels of communication open. With increasing military activity close to our borders, we must do everything we can to prevent military incidents or accidents. And if they do occur, we must keep them from spiraling out of control. That is why we held 2 meetings of the NATO-Russia Council this year. The other major theme at the Warsaw Summit was projecting stability. We know that if our neighbors are stable, we are more secure. NATO helps to build stability in our neighborhood through capacity building, training, working with partners, and maritime security. NATO has been on the front line in the fight against terrorism for many years, including through our operation and military presence in Afghanistan, which was launched in the response of the 9/11 terrorist attacks against the United States. And as you know, this is the first and the only time NATO has invoked our collective defense clause, Article 5. Our experience in Afghanistan has shown that having strong, highly trained local forces is vital to a country's security and stability. Training local forces is one of our best weapons in the fight against terrorism. This year alone, we have trained hundreds of Iraqi officers in Jordan, and we recently decided to extend our training and capacity building efforts into Iraq. That work will begin early next year. This training is an important contribution to the fight against ISIL, as is our AWACS surveillance aircraft, now flying from Konya here in Turkey in support of the counter-ISIL coalition. The situation in the Mediterranean remains serious. In response, earlier this month, we launched NATO's new maritime security operation, Sea Guardian. This operation will help protect the safety and the security of one of the world's busiest bodies of water. NATO's ships, submarines, and maritime patrol aircraft will perform core activities like surveillance, counterterrorism, and capacity building of regional navies. And NATO is supporting EU's Operation Sophia with information sharing and logistical support. This cooperation with the European Union in the Mediterranean is just one example of the benefit of closer cooperation between NATO and the European Union. The two organizations have transformed Europe, building the foundation for peace, security, and prosperity. And I'm pleased to say that NATO-EU cooperation is now closer than it has ever been. And this was underscored by the joint declaration I signed with the two Presidents Tusk and Juncker in Warsaw in July. And there is a momentum in the NATO-EU cooperation, and we must take this momentum, this opportunity to further strengthen and to do more in the field of NATO-EU cooperation. We are exploring ways to work together to counter hybrid threats, enhance cybersecurity, and coordinate exercises. As you all know, the European Union is considering options for strengthening European defense. And I welcome that initiative because it offers a way for European allies to deliver more capabilities and increase defense spending. Doing so will strengthen Europe, the EU, and NATO. It is important to make sure that those efforts are complementary, transparent, and mutually supportive, and that non-EU allies are closely involved because they make essential contributions to European security. A stronger Europe will mean a stronger NATO, and it will reinforce the transatlantic bond, a bond that has served the vital security interests of NATO members on both sides of the Atlantic. With that in mind, I am welcoming the incoming administration in Washington. And I look forward to working with President-elect Donald Trump. The partnership between Europe and the United States has been rock solid for almost 70 years. A partnership that has always received bipartisan support in the United States. And better burden sharing will make the transatlantic bond even stronger. After years of sliding defense spending, we have seen a shift. At our Wales summit in 2014, allies committed to spend 2% of GDP on defense within a decade. That commitment is already bearing fruit. In 2015, we stopped the defense cuts and we saw a spending increase across Europe and Canada. I expect further increase of 3% for European allies and Canada this year. So we are moving in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. And defense spending to reach the 2% target really matters. And let me illustrate by the following example. If all European allies and Canada were to meet the 2% spending target, that would mean an extra $100 billion worth of improvements to our capabilities. That is roughly the equivalent to the combined defense budgets of the two largest defense spenders in Europe, the United Kingdom and France, every year. This is where all of you come in. I'm confident that NATO can count on your continued support, just as we have relied on the support of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly over the past 6 decades. Since the founding of NATO in 1949, we have helped to secure the peace and provide the foundation for freedom and prosperity, supported by our citizens and their elected representatives, and dedicated to continued peace and security for our people and for future generations. So thank you for your support, thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to continue to work with all of you to strengthen the transatlantic bond and to strengthen NATO. Thank you.